Good afternoon. It is October 7th, 2024, and this is an update to Hurricane Milton, what has become a very intense and dangerous hurricane and potentially a life-threatening event. Hurricane Milton began strengthening overnight and has continued to strengthen throughout this morning and this afternoon, and indications appear that Hurricane Milton is still strengthening at this very moment. Winds are currently sustained at 175 miles per hour and minimum pressure as low as 911 millibars. Some hurricane models even bring this pressure even further down later on into the evening and into overnight hours, possibly tomorrow as well, into sub 900 territory. So we're dealing with a very, very intense storm. It's almost one for the record books. And Hurricane Milton, if you take a look at satellite, really means business. We can see here on satellite that Hurricane Milton definitely has that signature that we only see in very, very intense tropical cyclones. Has that central dense overcast really pumping, and we can see here that very, very symmetric look to Hurricane Milton as it travels eastward in the Gulf of Mexico. You can even see some purple indicators here near the center, and you only really see that with very, very intense storms. And that basically is telling us that those clouds are reaching high up into the atmosphere, and they're bringing off, and they're reading as very, very cool readings in some of these territories, and some of the negative 80 and negative 90 degree temperatures, and that's very, very high into the atmosphere, and that means that the storm is very, very intense, and it really doesn't show any signs of weakening. Now, if you're in the state of Florida and you're experiencing wet weather or some inclement weather, it isn't due directly to Hurricane Milton. There's an area of disturbed weather that is over the state of Florida that is trying to develop somewhat of a low pressure system, and that system is going to move off toward the east into the Bahamas. So if you're experiencing wet weather now, it's almost just a precursor to what is going to be a very, very long week weather-wise in the state of Florida. Now, some areas may actually see a lull in some of their weather on Tuesday. So if there are going to be any last-minute preparations, you may be able to squeeze some of those preparations out on Tuesday, depending on how the weather lines up. But as far as Hurricane Milton goes, and as it moves toward the state of Florida, we're going to notice that our weather is going to really take a turn for the worst once we get into our Wednesday. Just taking another look at Hurricane Milton's structure on the visible satellite, we can see a very, very strong system, and that eye is really beginning to show itself throughout satellite. It's a compact system as of now, but there are indications that this system is going to expand and get a little larger as it gets closer to the state of Florida. And that's bad news, because that is going to only make the situation worse when it comes to storm surge and some of the effects. When the storm begins to broaden out and begins to spread out, the effects will be felt wide range over the state and may not be as localized. However, if you're going to be near this center and somewhere in the state of Florida, it's going to be a bad day. Now, it's been very, very interesting this morning and this afternoon watching the trends with Hurricane Milton. We can see here, as the hurricane hunters were flying throughout the system, that the pressure has continually dropped throughout the entirety of this morning and afternoon. The first pass had a pressure of about 947, and we can see here the last pass had a pressure of 912. That is rapidly intensifying, and that is very indicative of a storm that is strengthening very, very quickly. And it is really bad news, because these storms that rapidly intensify, sometimes they take a long time to kind of spin down. There are some indications that there is a chance that this system may weaken a bit before it makes landfall in Florida, but these trends are very, very scary nonetheless. Now, here's the official forecast cone from the National Hurricane Center outlining that Hurricane Milton is going to continue somewhat on this eastward path for the next couple of hours and maybe into tonight, but it's going to begin to start to make a little bit of a northeast turn. Now, depending on where that northeast turn happens, and there is some land impact in chances with the Yucatan Peninsula, where that turn happens has big implications on what areas gets the worst of this storm. Now, if you follow this path right down the middle, this basically brings Milton toward the city of Tampa. However, if this storm tracks a little bit further south, it brings the worst weather toward the Fort Myers area, and then there is a possibility that that Milton may actually be a little north as well. So if you're on the west coast of Florida, anywhere on the Gulf Coast, you have to take this very, very seriously. This is going to produce some life-threatening storm surge and damaging winds, and you don't want to take this lightly, as there are some details and some wiggle room for actual landfall impacts along the state of Florida. Anywhere on the west coast, you can see here that hurricane watches are already outlined for the majority of the west coast of Florida, and then you see some other watches also thrown in there. Tropical storm watches are thrown in there for the Big Bend area and portions of the Keys. So this storm right now is a little compact, but it is going to broaden some, and it is going to get a little larger. So the effects are going to be felt even if you're not near the center. So this storm is something that we must take very, very seriously, because this has an opportunity to be a life-threatening event. Here is just a quick look at the ensembles and the hurricane tracks. And as you can see here, most of the tracks are pretty much locked in toward the central part of the state, making landfall somewhere around the Tampa Bay region. Like I mentioned, there is some wiggle room for landfall north of Tampa, south of Tampa. However, if you're on the west coast of Florida, you should be preparing for a major hurricane event within the next few days, as this event is going to be very, very serious. Now, I mentioned that there is an opportunity for your preparations to take place. If you have some last minute preparations you need to get done, there is an opportunity that you may be able to squeeze some of them in on Tuesday. Just showing you here, here's Milton. Initialized actually very, very weak here compared to what's actually taking place now. And then you also have this area disturbed weather. And I'm going to take this out in time, and we're going to see that the area disturbed weather begins to move away from Florida. And then there's somewhat of a gap on our Tuesday, maybe Tuesday morning to maybe Tuesday afternoon, where we may get some dry weather on our Tuesday to maybe make some of those last minute preparations. If it's evacuating, if it's putting up shutters, if it's getting, last minute supplies, you may be able to squeeze those out on Tuesday. However, if you don't get those done on Tuesday, Wednesday, our weather is going to go downhill very, very quickly. And if you're near the core of this system, you're going to notice that your weather is going to rapidly deteriorate throughout the day on Wednesday. So if you have any last second plans, you need to get those done before Wednesday, because those winds and those tropical storm force winds are expected to reach some portions of the Florida coastline by Wednesday morning. So you need to get those preparations done as soon as possible. The main thing, and I think the thing that is going to cause the most significant damage, is going to be the storm surge. We've noticed a lot of events where storm surge really does a number on some of these coastline areas, and some of the storm surge estimates are as high as 12 feet. So if you're going to be anywhere on the west coast of Florida and you live near the shore, I would highly suggest that you evacuate. And evacuation doesn't necessarily mean you have to drive 5 hours. You can literally just drive maybe a couple of miles inland to avoid that life-threatening storm surge. So in all, this is going to be a very dangerous event for the state of Florida. If you have any preparations that needs to be done, I would do those on now. Or if you have an opportunity on Tuesday, you may have a slight window to get them done on Tuesday. However, if you're not done by Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, the weather will begin to go downhill considerably. Please stay safe. Take the advice of your local meteorologist and the National Hurricane Center, and please take this seriously. That is all.